Originally produced by our team at Ingenuity Radio in 2002, Searching for the New Liberalism is a 9-part series adapted for this podcast, The Life of a Servant.
Welcome to Part 8. Moving the System Forward is the focus of this segment. Featuring Carolyn Bennett, Hugh Cameron, Jim Coutts, Michael Marzolini and Tom Kent.
Morning, my name is Hugh Cameron. My background is I started a business out of the back of my car and ended up with sales in 13 years of $100 million. I've been a fundraiser for the local parties for 15 years, and I would just like to say this, that this conference has re-energized my liberal roots. I think it's done a wonderful job. I'm here because I have 4 suggestions. I was the governor of the Weizmann Institute in Rehoboth, Israel, and I'm an honorary governor. I'm the token Gentile there. But they do something that we don't do in this country. They take businessmen and businesswomen and make them become the advisors to the university on how you get the good ideas and commercialize them. Dennis Mills told me yesterday that the University of Toronto has a method of reducing the pollution in diesel trucks, and they haven't got it on the market and they don't know how. And I think that every university should be required to set up a committee equivalent to the Weizmann committee, which is called YITA, to commercialize these good ideas. I think somebody said that we need to get municipalities doing good things again. I'll give you an example of Ann Mulvale in Oakville. There's a woman by the name of Mrs. Anderson came to Mississauga and said, I have $250,000. I want to build a palliative care place in memory of my hospital. She was told in Mississauga to go away. She went to Ann Mulvale, and Ann Mulvale says, that's a wonderful idea, and that's enough money. Ann Mulvale has a committee of 10 women and 1 token man, that's me, who turn around and do things in Oakville. We now have the Ian Anderson House on Newsby Churchill. It has 22 beds. It costs about $5 million to build and $250,000 a year to run, and it's done by this voluntary committee of Ann. I'm appalled that the government hasn't done as good a job as they should have done with the Aboriginals. We heard our speakers say that in Saskatchewan there's 115,000 Aboriginals, and there's $7 billion spent. That works out to $60,000 apiece. There's a better way to do it. $1 billion? But the government of Saskatchewan pays 6. For all Saskatchewan, that's $7 billion. The other thing is that I'm appalled at how much it costs to collect the GST. In Alberta, I think that under the old excise people, they had about 100 people in their collection department. They now have, I understand that it's now a 22-story building. And I think that the collection of the GST costs more than it really brings back. For instance, every trucker running around polluting this country doesn't pay GST. The only people that pay it are the people that drive their cars. The truckers get it all back. The Americans don't get it back. I think what you need, and I think it just costs so much to collect, and I don't know what it is. I've written a couple times to people in Ottawa, and I get back these funny answers that, well, they haven't been able to tell us how much. But I think what we need to do is turn around, make those truckers, it will make them non-competitive, pay the GST. I think we need to add it on, keep the GST and the gas tax, and make it non-refundable to business. I think we need to turn around and take and use the cars, keep the GST in cars, keep the GST in gas. I think you could have a department of about 100 people collecting the same amount of net revenue. Do you know how many people that are involved in business where all they're doing is figuring out the taxes that they collect and the taxes they have to send back out? It's an administrative nightmare. Anyway, I thank you for your time. You're a wonderful group. You're a great group. I said to Howard this morning when we can, I hope this continues for a long time. Thank you.
Well, I want to thank everybody. I think in the closing that it is I think in healthcare and in all of the things in the social justice agenda, we have to recognize this sort of complex adaptive system that must have feedback loops, that must figure out what does it take to make the kinds of changes we want. And in that, I just want to remind you what Charles Darwin said, as we look to the south and we look around the world, it's not the strongest of the species that survives, nor the most intelligent, but the one most responsive to change. And I hope that we will be able to figure out how to make that change.
I'm going to introduce, I think Michael's done first, so I'm going to introduce Richard Mahoney, our chairman and moderator for this section, as we move into party activities and liberal values as expressed in public opinion. Our moderator has been an activist of the party for many years, a distinguished lawyer, a commentator on TVO on the show, is it Idea? Studio 2, I've got it right. A television commentator who knows what it is to try to influence public opinion. I couldn't think of anybody better to guide us into the party response to many of the issues that we've been addressing for the last 10.5.
Thank you, Tom. When how happening, you actually didn't take study or in protocol, you couldn't do anyone better, you couldn't hate anyone. Can the system be moved? I guess we all hope so, because that is why we're here and that's why we're involved. Our first presenter is Michael Marzolini, the president of Polera. Without restating his presentation, Michael was from the Liberal Party of Canada's wholesale director in Federal and provincially for quite some time. And I think he'll take us through a presentation which will show us both the constraints and obstacles in front of us as we go to meet the system. Michael.
Thank you very much, Richard. We can move to slide presentation. Thank you. It's a great pleasure to be here today, being invited to such a congregation of very distinguished liberal thinkers, people who have been stewards of liberal values and actions for many generations. For me, it's especially gratifying to speak to a group of people, actually decision makers, who understand public opinion and who take it into account when making decisions in the public's interest. Now, presenting during lunch, I find today to be a bit ironic, since earlier this year I conducted a very scientific survey among MPs and Writing Association presidents as well as some trivial policy matters, but I did ask a very important question on my own behalf, and that is, I wanted to know with conferences and fundraising dinners, should the speech come before the meal or after the meal is over? And I was getting very tired of staring helplessly at my loafing lettuce from a salad plate while waiting for the Prime Minister to finish his remarks. Now, the poll results of that one showed that a solid majority of speakers wanted to get the speech out of the way first so they could better enjoy the meal, while at the same time a solid majority of their audience wanted to eat first and enjoy the speech over coffee later. The one thing they all agreed upon is that under no circumstances should the meal and the speech be consumed at the same time. But of course, he wrote that liberalism occasionally requires leading public opinion rather than just following it. Both Tom and I are doing that today. Now, addressing the issue, can the system be moved, it's very important to consider that liberalism is not static. It moves and progresses along lines defined by changing public opinion, cultural values, and needs. Today's liberalism has much in common with yesterday's conservatism, give or take the margin of error of about 50 years. It evolves slowly, though the past 10 years or so, the velocity of movement has increased dramatically, and public attitudes towards the role of government, both socially and economically, have changed from what they were just a decade ago. Public opinion and liberalism evolved together in quite a remarkable fashion. Liberal values mirror the values of the public opinion of the public itself. 6 in 10 Canadians, when forced to make a choice, identify themselves as being small L liberals. And this is twice the number who identify themselves as being small c conservatives, and 6 times the number who see themselves as being socialists. Now, this greatly facilitates the ability of liberalism to evolve and adjust to changes of public opinion. In most cases, liberalism manifested in the actions of liberal government had trailed but followed public opinion. It's been some mention of that in the last couple of days. Doesn't seem to be all that popular, but that is, in my view, the way that it should be. Changes in public opinion need time to be realized and adjusted to by the public itself. Only when governments or party activists forge ahead of public opinion do they risk losing the public's confidence. And you saw this in the last couple of weeks with the trial balloon suggesting a 10% GST, which was thankfully shelved within hours, but not without some cost of political capital. Now, taking strong and immediate action ahead of public opinion is often necessary for government to do its job responsibly. The 1995 budget, the example, the public only became convinced of the necessity to kill the deficit midway through the campaign to do so. It would have taken far too long to get them on side first. But while one can lead public opinion on specific policy, there are greater risks to being too far ahead of public opinion in the broad context of liberalism. The former is an opinion subject to rapid change. The latter is a value which only changes slowly over time. Liberalism is not a brand, it is a product category. This category consists of brands which have been defined at various times in history by very strong brand managers, ranging from C.D. Howe, Paul Martin, Walter Gordon, to all the Liberal prime ministers to varying degrees. Trudeau provided the strongest brand identity, one whose values endure as well today as they did during his term in office. The public expectations of government today are far different than they were during the golden era of political entrepreneurship. Liberalism has been the more successful political ideology in Canada for the single reason that it has never failed to evolve. It has rarely been left in the dust of public opinion. It is centrist, with no inhibitions about making forays into the left and into the right of the political spectrum. Now, indeed, political spectrum spanning has limited opposition opportunities for growth and maximized Liberal Party support for many years. And these forays, both to the left and to the right, which have served to fine-tune liberalism against the ever-changing map of public opinion. Now, this isn't easy, considering that the political center is always moving like a pendulum from right to left and then back again. It is further complicated by the subdivisions within this pendulum, very different public agendas with respect to social policy and economic policy. During the last decade, both agendas have moved quite independently from each other to varying degrees, socially to the left, while at the same time economically to the right. And this makes it very difficult for any political party, except the Liberals, to position themselves closely with the public. Now, in looking at the question, can the system be moved, there's certainly in Canada a willingness to embrace a revitalized and progressive social policy, as there is also a concurrent desire to enjoy a higher standard of living. Now, these have manifested themselves in two very different government approaches. One is the innovation agenda, while the other is the social cohesion agenda. Both in concert provide a balanced approach to spectrum positioning. Now, social cohesion, of course, has been in the spotlight as a result of Robert Putnam's book, Bowling Alone, which was a bestseller in Ottawa and not very widely read in Toronto. Indeed, I thought of calling my presentation here today Polling Alone, but I figured his lawyers might object. Actually, I first heard of Putnam's book at a wedding when the Green's father asked me what I did for a living, and I told him I was in the polling business. He said, 5-pin or 10-pin. But then he started to rattle off statistics from the decline of organized bowling leagues, which he had picked up from the social changes described in the book. But Putnam's study was very much a made in America product, and one of the parallels that doesn't reflect completely the state of affairs in Canada. Earlier this year, Polaris sponsored a national survey for Kruger College of Public Affairs, exploring many of the Canadian values surrounding social cohesion with an attempt to assess the opportunities and limitations in this agenda. I'd like to provide a few rough perspectives on this Canadian value map and on social cohesion's potential place in the broad context of liberalism, especially with respect to the innovation agenda. The goal of the latter is to provide a higher standard of living to Canadians. Social cohesion's goal is to develop shared values, challenges, and opportunities in Canada based on increased hope, trust, and reciprocity among Canadians. When these goals are not contradictory, together they actually produce a wide straddling of the political center. But many of the government interventions by which each of these can be achieved do conflict, not only in policy, but also in public opinion. Now, governments around the world have embraced social cohesion agendas primarily as a means to counter the increasing public disconnection and isolation from their democratic institutions. They now have to determine what roles they can play that are both appropriate and effective, and more importantly, how the social cohesion agenda can be bought into by a public that will never fully endorse a solution without understanding the problem. In the 13 years we've been tracking the preferred role for government, we've seen a lot of change. 13 years ago, a slim majority of Canadians wanted highly active government, a government that would solve their problems and protect and cradle to grave. They were introspective, protectionist, and dependent. The boundaries of their world ended at the U.S.-Canadian border, and since they strongly opposed the FTA, even the strength of this border was regarded with a lot of trepidation. Concepts like a guaranteed annual income, which make most Canadians shudder today, were popular back then. The national deficit and debts were not even in our vocabulary, and unemployment was something to be solved with mega projects and direct government employment. The demands on government were far greater than before this time and had a much different orientation from what they are today. Now, since that time, we've seen a steady and marked shift to the point where the largest number of Canadians now desires a government that is faster and more independent and more able to solve their own problems. When unemployment is high, they no longer expect government to provide direct employment like was common back in the 70s and 80s. They now look for government for training and direction, and to create the economic environment that stimulates private sector hiring. The majority now welcomes NAFTA and thinks that globalization will provide benefits not only to them, but also far more to their children. They're now budget conscious and more sensitive to public spending. They were asked during the war against the deficit to tighten their belt to get it under control. They don't want to give up the gains that they've worked for. They may worry about their pension, but they've increased their savings ratio, given more thought to retirement planning. Now, this is not to say that the demand on government is reduced. The 16% of Canadians who tell us that the proper role of government is to stay out of people's lives and not interfere has not changed significantly in 10 years. Rather, the only shift has been from cradle-to-grave orientation to one in government to help us help ourselves. And this is the overlay through which they see each of the factors that make up the social cohesion. A shift towards self-reliance was not forced upon Canadians. They came to the conclusion themselves as a result of 5 different factors: NAFTA, the move to fuller employment, globalization, the war in the deficit, and the internet. These have all helped Canadians become more independent and outward-looking, more entrepreneurial, dedicated to individual initiative, and in many ways more economically sophisticated. Canadians also believe in individual initiative and hard work. They believe that competition is not a bad thing in itself and that people can accumulate wealth without hurting others. And these serve as rigid confines on the level of economic intervention and approach the government could make with respect to promoting social cohesion. The OECD concept of social cohesion tends to recognize this. The Council of Europe approach is less applicable to Canadian attitudes and values. Now, at the same time, there's a belief and a desire across Canada for social justice. There is some recognition and concern that Canada, especially with the growth of globalization and technology, may now be approaching a trend of two-tier economic development. New technologies, many people feel, may widen income and opportunity disparities instead of closing them. Now, the federal government's broadband strategy, albeit underfunded due to lack of resources, is clearly a key component of both the innovation agenda and the social cohesion agenda. That program is not designed to equalize income. It's only to provide more equalization for opportunity and access for a higher standard of living. Now, despite a desire for more equal distribution of wealth across Canada, straight and simple income redistribution is not a desired course of action on the part of most Canadians. Cross-analyzing the results of those proposing more equal incomes indicates that these same people also believe strongly in competition, hard work, individual initiative, and responsibility. Most of them consider themselves to be liberals. To them, lack of opportunity is a social injustice, and its resolution will be beneficial, both individually and collectively. Now, further evidence of the confines of the government's abilities to promote social cohesion is provided by the lack of Canadians willing to make a trade-off between increased spending on social services and higher taxes. Despite their concern over social injustices, there is not the public will, and this will impact on the political will, for more money to be thrown at the problem. Politically, the status quo is the government's easiest position. Political positioning, however, is often based on simple majorities of public opinion. It often overlooks the significant minorities. In this case, 1 in 5 Canadians would be prepared to pay higher taxes for more social spending. This is why segmenting and analyzing these population clusters will be quite important in the understanding of this issue and to make the case against the tyranny of the majority. Now, a similar quarter of all Canadians, most of them the same people endorsing high taxes and social spending, also opposed the move to privatization of government commercial operations. Having told them the CN, the Petro-Can, and Air Canada privatizations, as well as those of many provincial utilities, we can state this number doesn't change significantly across any of the sectors. It's a hardcore collectivist truth of well-educated New Democrats and left-leaning Liberal supporters who oppose any moves toward private ownership. Similarly, supporters of privatization are to be found in the Alliance, PC, and centrist Liberal support groups. And it's this latter group that has the most impact on political decisions involving all issues related to both innovation and social cohesion. No political party wishes to isolate its own supporters. Liberal voters are firmly in the center. But where this sometimes limits the efficacy of government in promoting some aspects of social cohesion, it also encourages the social cohesion agenda in many other ways. Politically, the social cohesion agenda complements the innovation agenda. Governments, especially this government, which is very widely straddling the political center, cannot afford to take out an unbalanced position, either on the right or on the left. It must stay anchored in the center, and while some aspects of social cohesion tend to run counter to the individualist views, which are more in line with the innovation agenda, it also enhances the appeal of the whole package to both collectivists and individualists. It is a political risk for government to promote either the innovation agenda or the social cohesion agenda alone. As a package of the two, it minimizes this risk while promoting the maximum good. This is not to say that those who support parts of the social cohesion agenda are smaller or less significant than would support parts of the innovation agenda. Indeed, despite their lack of willingness to pay higher taxes, there is a majority support in Canada for improved social services, even if it meant more government spending. The state has also seemed to have the right to intervene in many social issues, notably here environmental and health-related. Canadians very much take a menu approach to all the individual facets of collectivism and individualism. What they tend to choose could be termed contradictory, but I tend to view it as more balanced. We may want less government intervention generally, and that may be confined to giving us the tools to doing the job ourselves. But there is recognition that many aspects of our life should not be run by private enterprise, and that there are areas in which the government must intervene. Again, this is a balanced approach that is politically encouraging for both agendas, giving government more efficacy while removing unwanted obligations from the private sector. While it's important that the encouragement of social cohesion by government be along lines firmly acceptable to Canadians, it should be remembered that this level of probability will move backwards and forwards like a pendulum. Politically, opinion polls have been tracking the movement of the political center from left to right and back again in durations lasting about 5 years, for at least as long as polls have been taken. Currently, the economic political center is to the right, though socially it is still marginally on the center left. Both will eventually return or move further to the left, and it's likely that government institutions will increase in importance, trust will increase, and community spirit will be enhanced. We've seen some of this post-September 11th this year, but whether it's a brief check in public attitude or a more lasting effect, it's nearly too early to tell. I'm very much looking to tracking some of these questions next year. Social participation, not have been declining these past 2 decades, but Canadians are not writing off its importance. Indeed, if you look at whether the glass is half full or half empty, the situation may not have been what it was, but it's far from despairing. The importance of social interaction and involvement are at least recognized as being important by Canadians. In this, we compare it very favorably to American attitudes. Again, these levels of importance will be fascinating to track next year after Canadian Memories of September 11th and the further. Former U.S. teacher Tip O'Neill once said that all politics is local. It's predictable that Canadians feel closer to their towns and neighborhoods than they feel towards their country. But the intensity of closeness is greatest with respect to Canada. And this surprised me. I've seen a lot of data suggesting that we're actually closer to our provinces in our country. This is the first time, though, that it's actually asked the question in this way. But while these may appear to be encouraging, it's again the minority opinion that must be taken into account. A fifth of Canadians seem to have little connection to their town and neighborhood, even though, in cross-analysis, they've been living there for an average 14 years. And even worse, more than a quarter have no connection to Canada itself. This is a very high number, far greater than the percentage of separatists in the country. However, this is the problem that can be directly approached by governments through communications messaging and the fostering of a stronger and more unique brand identity sensitive to our values and culture. Levels of community spirit are even more alarming and problematic in Canada. Only 1/3 of the population really believe that people in general feel a sense of community with others. Most believe they're only as for themselves. It will take further analysis and correlating with the other questions on the survey to fully explore or explore the reasons for this. It could be a mixture of crime, growth of individuality and competition, growing lack of public trust for individuals and institutions. We know from our regular quarterly tracking report, Perspective Canada, which is available at reasonable cost, that confidence and trust in all individuals and institutions has been declining throughout the last 8 years, both in the private sector and also the public sector. A couple of ways of our yearly public trust index can be found on our Polaro website, and we rank trust in about 50 institutions and occupations. We've seen all of them declining. This year, however, post-September 11th, we've seen a small recovery in trust and confidence for every type of institution. Public utilities, banks, insurance companies, oil and gas, telecom, joining governments at all levels, moving ahead on both these trusting and trusting. Whether this is short-term or more lasting impact, we can't really determine. We'll track it, hope that at least with significant residue of improvement continues. Currently, the most socially cohesive attitude we've measured is that everybody seems to hate our Canada. But when it comes to Canadian trust in their government, this is the area in which the most improvement is necessary, and indeed which may be driving many other unproductive attitudes. Canadians have always been critical to government, and this should be expected to some degree. However, the sense of disconnection that we currently have with our government is quite significant and rather ugly. It paints a picture of a people who are being isolated by governments, who are perceived as being out of touch, not caring what the public thinks, inaccessible, not always out for the public's best interest. This is not a recent occurrence. Indeed, the results were actually worse more than a decade ago during the Mulroney administration, on a scale of 1 to 10, where 1 is not at all impressed and is very much impressed. The federal government, the civil service, and the party in office all rated lower than the 3 on that 1-point scale. All are now over 5, but still have far to go. And if they're not overly happy with the institutions and disconnected from governments, the public is equally subdued when it comes to their satisfaction with our level of democracy. Again, the emphasis must be on the 3 in 10 Canadians who are not satisfied. Further exploration of this issue with these people is necessary. Now, let's be made within the social cohesion agenda of the problems of declining voter turnout. And while it's not to be denied that participation levels in society are not where we'd like them to be, I strongly believe that too much has been made of this issue as where it applies to voting. In 1988, we had a very high turnout as a result of a divisive issue, free trade, which many Canadians felt would threaten their livelihood. In 1993, we had a lower turnout, though closer to the historical average, as the issue was jobs. There were a lot of people out of work. The incumbent government was highly unpopular. At this time, we've had 2 more elections, each one progressively more boring, progressively less threatening to anybody's way of life, and resulting in progressively lower turnouts. But in 1995, during the Quebec referendum and the ultimate of threatening situations, more than 90% of eligible voters cast a ballot. In every election and at every level of government, the turnout has always been proportional to the threat posed by the issues being debated. When the issue is important, Canadians can be counted on to vote. There are many people in this room, and some may have done so, that could easily design a party election platform so radical that 90% of the public would be motivated to vote. But of course, they'd be voting against it. Now, there's no evidence of the need for mandatory voting or for moving to a system of proportional representation, both of which I've heard suggest. But the voter participation has clearly declined to the last 3 elections in a way that I at least believe has very little to do with social cohesion, and is due to the importance of voting and the importance of civic duty. Witness that some 26% of the public would lie to us on a survey such as this, saying they had voted when the actual turnout was 61%. And they at least recognize the social stigma resulting from not bothering to vote. While Canadian political involvement compares favorably with other Americans, there's no dispute that it could be higher and that this would be beneficial all the way down the line. Over the past decade, there have been some small victories for the public, which have given them a feeling of greater empowerment. The negative option cable television issue, when the industry occasioned the public pressure, the reversal of the NHL taxpayer bailout when the people spoke and the government listened, Air Canada's decision to back off their Aeroplan point reduction changes. There are very few such victories in past years. But this hasn't been enough. There are still a majority of Canadians who don't actively participate in public affairs. And this isn't surprising, considering the majority who feel they can't have any effect and that the government doesn't care what people like don't think. So, you didn't ask specifically about bowling leagues or choral singing. As Putnam did in his study, we do find that group participation in Canada is limited to a minority of people, which tend to be the same core people involved in multiple organizations. There's much the government can do to stimulate the development of a community of shared values and inclusiveness. However, most of the standard methods result in only short-term improvements. Longer-term improvements need to be based on a greater spirit of trust and goodwill with respect to these institutions and these levels, although to begin with. There are really more questions and answers to be found in the issue of social cohesion. The one I spend a lot of time thinking about is what level of social cohesion is desirable. Having too much would likely be as damaging as having too little. The perfect example of extreme social cohesion, after all, is the Hells Angels biker gang. However, we do have a long way to go before we worry about this question. Currently, only significant minorities of the public are participating and getting involved in public issues. The rest are isolated and disconnected, and this affects both their outlook and their usefulness to society. Only in the area of voluntary work do we find anything approaching a majority level of participation, and then we still have that significant minority that is not participating. For government, it's easy to approach some of the components of social cohesion. Securing the means to achieve equal opportunity is, after all, an industry in government. It's always striving in this direction and will likely always do so. The broadband strategy is just one of a long line of those initiatives, but one that deals with the threat of two-tier economic development. Participation in census community can be artificially, so only partially stimulated through the encouragement and founding of organizations such as Katimavik, USO, similar programs of National Youth Service, both for the domestic market and for export. Branding the Canadian identity is unique and valuable to stimulate peace and connection, as could positioning Canadian history as more relevant to our heritage. Communications can play a key role in fostering participation, identity, and connection. However, in the current political climate, the government has neither the funds nor the political will for such communications. The public themselves have always viewed advertising as being self-serving and wasteful, especially in the past 6 months. Perhaps we need to look at all government communications and advertising within the framework of promoting social cohesion and give it enhanced priority under this new agenda. To do this would also mean putting the issue of social cohesion on the table for public discussion and much input. The public will not endorse a solution until they fully understand the problem, and I doubt that one person in 20 has even heard of the word social cohesion, the term, much more what it means. And advertising is not the only confinement the government must face in dealing with social cohesion. The Canadian public holds both individualistic and collective values, sometimes at the same time, and there is much to the agenda that they would embrace and refuse sometimes again at the same time. Income redistribution, changes to tax structure, government ownership of commercial operations, or any regulatory change that impacts too bluntly on Canadians' strong feelings of individual initiative are too risky to approach today. That could change with time. But the major political aspect of the agenda that will ensure its place at the table is that social cohesion is political insurance when proceeding with the innovation agenda. Its inclusion puts the government and indeed liberalism in balance, with anchors on both the political right and the left, and enhances the appeal of both as a package. Such a package minimizes the political risk to the government while at the same time promoting the maximum good. Thank you very much. As Kim Campbell once said, most people tire of pollsters in 20 minutes. Intelligent people tire of them in 10 minutes. And really smart people never listen to us at all. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Michael. Very indebted to Tom for organizing this conference. As I look around the room, talking about the system being moved, I see the first person I ever worked for in Parliament Hearst at Harvard Health South Wales. I had the chance to work in his office. I see John Roberts, who I had the chance to work for. There's a certain lady backbencher from Montreal who I've had the chance to have passed occasion with. But none, it seems to me, more impressive or historic than our next speaker. In early 1960s, he organized the Kingston Conference. He then had the chance to not only reframe the liberal debate, but implement those ideas in the office of Prime Minister Pearson, the intellectual godfather of modern Canadian liberalism. Can the system be moved? Tom Kent.
Over. Thank you. I greatly appreciate the opportunity for being asked to talk on this occasion. I apologize to my friends that I'm somewhat handicapped by straight my throat. I think that's I was in the head and I'll be able to work for not too long that it's then the system removed. What is actually used by the system will be defining for me. I take a rather broad brush approach to right heartening, and of course the answer certainly can be used sometimes. Has been in the past, and the society we're certainly not slowing down. So I take the can, in fact, to be shorthand for when and how. And the question I have a response in 4 parts. First, a brief generalization about what's needed in order to achieve major change. Second, some lesson from experience in the 1960s. Third, a recognition of what's different now, or some of what's different now. And that will lead to a brief conclusion of offering a little unsolicited advice to our as-yet Prime Minister, how to give himself a truly locked-in legacy to restore the politics to Canadian adults. However, my true expectation was other people would be left to do that. Now first then, what's usually needed for the job of effective major change? My answer is very simple. It's to be a voice out. It's to lead report. For always barriers to change, often coexisting with plenty of wish for it. And the disparity isn't in what holds true measure, but you say the changing extent of the two attitudes. More often change is in fact inhibited because the dependence of the status quo are more focused, they know what they're sticking to. The alternative of what may be is often vague, uncertain, in political terms, a promise of a kind that's usually broken. Now, my main point is that need not be. People who want change can do better than spin vague proposals without political bumps. They can get down to the hard work when it counts most, which is before the moment of opportunity for change actually arrives. What I repeat means being prepared, but means having the tools for change ready and sharp. Now that's hard work in 2 ways. First, it means, as has been said on several occasions, but it must be emphasized, first it means choosing priorities.
You can't do very much of what at any one time we would want to do. We have to identify the big issues that may prove we may like to change. And second, it means preparing on those issues firm plans to take it out of your back pocket as soon as the time is right. The reformers who can emerge as victors in the policy battles are those who are poised to seize their opportunities because they're ready with their plans in their back pockets. Now, that's the collective experience, what is worth that I would draw from the post-war period. For the unfixed I'll summarize very briefly. Canada emerged in 1945 with a Liberal federal government ready to build a welfare state. It was frustrated by the provincial government of Ontario and Quebec, so it turned to managing well, and I emphasize well, the post-war economic expansion. But in the process, it became the complacent, autocratic establishing party. It became that in the 1950s. Out of touch with the increasingly confident-facing values of the new Canada. The consequences, although many of you will remember, the phrase that said it all, $6 tariff. The election defeat was crushing in numbers, but even more because it showed how heavily the Liberal organization, which is mistaken for the Liberal Party and for liberalism sometimes, the Liberal organization had come to depend on people who were there not for Liberal policy, but for the prestige or advantage of being with the government party. And when the connection ended, many of those people, most of those people, went into hibernation or whatever. The result, the party became capriciously ineffective for a new generation of activists to take it over. And that takeover was very easy for some years, thanks to the central thing that we did right. Come to my thesis, quite early we defined our programs. There was nothing remarkable about our ideas. Most had been around for a long time. They were politically realistic at the time. They were in the air at the time. What was different from other times was that we wrote out the programs more plainly, more precisely, more firmly. In 1962 and 1963, what a Liberal government would do was make clear, to a degree quite different from any time before or since. But since mainly defending it with anyone who still thinks that the 1993 Red Book was much more than a lavish reckoning for what a new government might or might not do, the little pamphlets from 1962 and 63 were less ambitious, but unfortunately they were precise enough to hold the government to a disarming force. Between the writing and the doing, there were, of course, some of you, many of you there know, there were fierce battles. The balance of power shifted somewhat. The Nazis came into sight. Hibernators emerged, right? People who had stayed around and accepted criticism, purport, not in conviction, now called for sober session courts, not only in the Senate. The late stage was a rotten, beaten place regime apart. The 15th cabinet is perhaps Canada's most contagious. And the battles were mighty. But the outcome was almost always the same. The guardians of the policy, to borrow a piercing phrase, were the winners. Their agenda was on the table, their programs publicly declared. There was a vision. They were usually on the defensive, scared about having them alone in their time of weakness. I don't mean, of course, that the programs as they were implemented were exactly as proposed. Far from it. But few of the changes were political in sense. There was more in culture, bureaucratic and other refining. The greatest changes were, of course, in the programs that needed breaking in the other than federal-provincial relations. I show you this often. In the case of the retirement package, CPP, QPP, GIS, OAS at age 65 and index, case of that outcome of a massive improvement on European tension. In the case of Medicare, there were improvements, but also dilutions, and then you don't sharp or rigidity, it gets its translation of a year's delay. But on the whole, not just in those two cases, what was done with what the intended the programs held. They wouldn't have held if they hadn't been ready beforehand, waiting for the time of opportunity. I should note one big retreat. That was on multi-government investment nationalism, and significantly, it was a policy segment where definite motives hadn't been developed and declared in advance. So, the view I want to offer on this point is the policy ideas discussed at conference. Those ideas certainly deserve far better than eventual selection between the couples of organic. And on the conference, the thought itself will be the right start. But then the need will be to work out priorities and for the key measures define the details. Now, in that area of strategy and politics, strategy and tactics, things haven't changed, in my view, since the 60s or any other time. But in most other respects, things have changed greatly. I've attempted to face about the major changes that seem to be insignificant. It's all for very substantial, in my view, institutional changes in the tax structure. I'm not talking about tax levels, I'm talking about the tax structure. They call certainly for some very considerable changes in federal-provincial relations compared with the way they've been conducted for quite a long time now. They call for changes in the electoral system, some fundamental ones, such as being able to have constitutional amendment, but some changes that could be made now, have although any changes within political parties. And that's why I decided eventually that rather than try and bore you for a long time, I'd concentrate on just one problem, or know the best that helps with seeming to make too much for them on actually. The problem I'm going to concentrate on for the moment is one that was very small for us from the 1960s, but is now dominant. That problem is the dollar. I don't mean the exchange rate. I don't mean deficit concerns, government or party. I mean party money from the wrong sources. The Liberal Party is now a dependency of corporate finance. It's not alone, of course, in that. And such dependency is the EU, maybe for John A. and the Canadian Pacific. Many people seem to think that money always rules in politics. In fact, its role has varied greatly with time and place. It lessened in Canada as was in Federation restored. The vote for women in 1919 made, I think, a crucial difference. And certainly for some years thereafter, corporate funding wasn't of much account in Liberal or Freedom policies. The last 25 years or so have been greatly different. What's remarkable to me is the triumph of the spin doctors. They've managed to somehow make people think, I think, that the prize is seen as small. It wasn't. In 1958, the campaign to get elect Mike Pearson, leader of a national party, cost $3,000. This year, the leadership of an Ontario party, as you know, cost $3 million. Now, to Pearson was a special case. But not in this respect very special. I have no inside knowledge of the 1956 Conservative National Convention, but I was a close observer of it, and I'd be surprised to learn that different expenses were as much as $10,000. Today, if there are a serious contest for local leadership, I'm not suggesting that there is, if there were, really would probably cost 10 million. I've got one extra this issue. To remind you that the reason why Liberals had no opportunity to visit at home for the party meeting a decade ago, as I know many would have done, was that he couldn't raise the $7 figure, $7-figure amount, was needed then, even then, to be seriously in the running for the party leadership. Popular would indeed business. Now, politicians and business executives hastily saying that political donations are made from goodness of heart, not to buy anything. If that's true, of course, they're as illegitimate for the company as $1 million birthday parties. Businesses are incorporated for specified commercial purposes. They've no right to spend their shareholders' money unbeknownst to politicians. And in fact, of course, the donations do buy influence. Direct favors for particular companies of money are necessarily tricked issues for. Right. Cozy interventions in government policy and administration aren't receptive. And that's why, for years now, the agenda of government has been so close to the agenda of, shall I say, Tom DeCino's Chief Executive Office. Among Liberals, the talk may not have changed as much as elsewhere, but the walk certainly has. The contrast between $1,000 and $1 million leaders is palpable. In the 1960s, the angriest protests were not in the streets. They came from the boardrooms and the executive suites by Medicare and CTP and all that, were denounced as the ruin of the nation. Orthodoxy now refers to all liberals, saying those measures is the proud embodiment of their values. Does anyone honestly think that such social programs would have been enacted in the 1960s if the politicians of the 1960s had been as beholden to corporate finance as the politicians of today? Many desirable economies have been talked about. If we want to achieve them, moving the system comes first. Political financing has to be reformed. Federal politics has to catch up with Quebec and Manitoba in the elimination of organizational money. But legislation will be easy. Even for more than most, it had better be clearly defined before the battle is joined. You could find some even further in their writings. Now, I'll also avoid misrepresentation. The reason to get corporate money out of politics is to restore political interest to the public. It's not that then parties would then be left here to business. This represents trees for profits more. Personally, I've argued for longer than I like to remember that the corporate income tax shouldn't be reduced. It should be abolished entirely on profits distributed to shareholders. But, and I should say, I think I must break my role and get back to the larger another issue for a moment. In saying that, of course, I can emphasize that it's only one item in the package of tax reforms, tax structure reforms, that, in my view, liberalism reused for the future requires. In fact, I'm sorry, but you haven't spent more time on that issue. And indeed, along with electoral reform, I think it's one of the main ways to move the system. But I want to emphasize that the crucial thing about moving the system is to restore our political parties to what they were in a long time, and certainly still were in the 1960s. Voluntary associations of people primarily held together by their common interest in what a range of public policy should be. Seeing a political party as the natural outlet for that interest, rather than being driven to concentrate on particular causes, even and as important as the environmental causes. I don't know whether this is an area that socialism much explored the question being what's including it. But I've no doubt that for this change in the political parties, this is the moment of opportunity. Corporate financing is in disrepute, even more disrepute than politics, creating an overwhelming demand to separate the two, take purchasing influence out of politics, would be an easy campaign, in my view, for any group of competent politicians to seek the country. Would it be easy, in my view, in the time of penalty for the prison recognition, trying to and of training, and I think it could be even easier now, and particularly, in front of one of those issues raised yesterday, being moving, of course, for new ways to make connections, particularly with young people. The lives of under 40s, which we know that I was twice as easy in person. The lives of under 40s, there is an issue, so the mental sheet that we talked about yesterday. However, it may be that there's our present question of democracy, none of that is needed. For the time being, Prime Minister is going to raise his hand to flank political financing to revive the heart of liberty. Even for him, would be very different from death conversion to effective total schemes for which there's little money today and success may not stick to. I think that financial reform of politics, for reform of political parties themselves, is a vital organization of democracy. Wouldn't be very costly for the public first. It would be the firmest and tiniest of races. I'm sure you might also think that it would just come to our friend Paul Martin. That, of course, would be just incidental, not a motive. However, I'm not happy for one moment. This is advice which I take or wish to have taken. It's not what I'd like to be trained to intend. The fact of viewing liberalism within the Liberal Party, liberalism as one of the vital forces in the organization of political parties which I repeat are the essentials of democracy. That is a task for younger reformers. Thank you.
You have been listening to The Life of a Servant, a Dennis Mills podcast. Visit dennismills.com for more information and archived episodes of this program.